The bakers donned the world beyond the thick, frosted windows of Maple Rise Bakery was a vault of deepest indigo, the kind of darkness that pressed close and muffled sound. Inside, however, a different kind of night reigned, warm, fragrant, and alive with quiet industry. Amos, shoulders broad and rounded from decades of lifting sacks and shaping loaves, moved through the familiar gloom guided by touch and ingrained memory. His hands, thick-fingered and permanently dusted with a fine, pale powder like geological strata, found the switch. Fluorescent tubes sputtered awake, casting a stark, unforgiving light on the utilitarian space, stainless steel counters deep. Sinks, towering mixers, and the twin behemoths of the brick ovens, their iron doors cold and mute for now. He shrugged on his apron, heavy canvas, faded to a soft gray blue, its front a landscape of flower ghosts from countless batches. The ties cinched around his solid middle with the comforting weight of ritual. First, the sourdough mother. She lived in a wide ceramic crock near the back sink, a bubbling yeasty universe unto herself. Amos lifted the lid, inhaling the complex. Tang, ripe fruit, damp earth, a hint of vinegar, the very breath of life itself. He plunged his hand in, the cool, elastic mass clinging like wet clay. A practiced fold, a gentle stir, feeding her a cup of flour and warm water drawn from the deep well. "Easy now, old girl," he murmured, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "Time to wake the world." He covered her, tucking the crock into a slightly warmer corner near the pilot light of the oven. A promise of heat to come. Next, the foundation, the daily white and whole wheat. Flour cascaded from the giant hopper into the industrial mixer, a soft, susurrating avalanche that filled the air with a dry, sweet cloud. Amos turned his face slightly, letting the fine particles settle on his stubble. He added precise measures of water, cool from the deep Vermont aquifer, a pinch of salt like scattered gray pebbles, and fresh yeast that bloomed pale gold in its small bowl. He engaged the mixer, its rhythmic thrum, 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 the first steady heartbeat of the morning. As the hook pulled the shaggy mass together, Amos leaned against the cool steel counter, his eyes half closed. From deep in his chest, a low hum began. It wasn't a tune most in this Vermont village would recognize. It was older, laced with the hollers and pine slopes of Appalachia, a fragment of Shady Grove, the melody winding through the mechanical drone like smoke through trees. Shady Grove, my little love. Shady Grove, I say. The words were barely breathed, more vibration than sound, a private comfort against the pre-dawn silence. When the dough achieved its ragged cohesion, Amos stopped the machine. This was where hands took over. He heaved the great, pale mound onto the broad, floured counter. The initial touch was cool and slightly resistant. He began to knead. Push with the heels of his hands, fold, turn, push again. A deep, satisfying rhythm established itself. The soft thump of dough meeting wood, the faint shush of flour beneath, the creak of the floorboard under his shifting weight. His hands worked with a strength born of necessity and a surprising tenderness. He felt the dough transform beneath his touch, from a loose collection of elements into a cohesive living thing. The gluten strands developed, creating an elastic network that trapped the yeast's eager breath. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's lingering night chill. He kneaded until the dough was smooth, supple, and sprang back with resilience. When gently pressed, a pale, yielding glow pregnant with potential. He oiled huge bowls, nestled the dough inside, covered them with damp, flour-dusted cloths, and left them to rise in a specially warmed cabinet, their slow expansion a silent, invisible miracle. The rhythm intensified. While the foundational doughs rested, Amos turned to the day's sweet promises. Butter, rich and pale yellow, softened on the counter. Brown sugar, dark and sticky, was measured into cavernous bowls. Eggs cracked with sharp snaps, their yolks like miniature suns falling into the mix, and then the cinnamon. He opened the large tin, and the air transformed. A wave of warm, sweet, woody spice unfurled. Cinnamon, yes, but also nutmeg freshly grated. Cloves ground that morning, a touch of ginger. It was perfume, memory, and comfort distilled. He measured generous cups, the fragrant dust catching the light as it fell, scenting his wrists, his apron, the very air he breathed. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. The Appalachian lullaby wove through his humming now, softer, as he stirred the filling into a glossy, fragrant paste. The sharp, almost peppery scent of the cinnamon melded with the deeper sweetness of sugar and butter, creating an aroma so potent it felt almost visible. A golden haze in the bakery's light, rolling out the dough for the morning buns, was a broad, sweeping motion. He used a long, smooth rolling pin worn thin at the center from generations of pressure. The dough yielded, spreading into a vast, thin rectangle that covered half the counter. He spread the cinnamon filling with a broad palette, knife leaving a careful border. The scent intensified, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. Rolling it tight required focus and strength, a careful coaxing to create the perfect spiraled log. His knife, honed sharp, sliced through it cleanly, revealing the intricate whorls of dough and dark filling. Each bun was nestled into waiting. Pans where they would rise again, plumping up like sleepy children. The ovens demanded attention now. Amos opened the heavy iron door of the first one, releasing a wave of residual warmth that felt like opening a furnace in the still cool air. He fed seasoned maple logs into the firebox below the baking chamber. The flames caught with a hungry whoosh, painting his face in flickering orange and gold. He watched the fire take hold, the heat beginning to radiate upwards, warming the thick bricks. Closing the door felt significant, sealing in the growing inferno. He repeated the process with the second oven, the warmth in the bakery beginning to build steadily, chasing away the last vestiges of the night's chill. The oven doors grew warm to the touch, radiating a comforting heat against his floury knuckles when he brushed against them. He placed a kettle on the small stove in the corner, the gentle hiss promising coffee soon. The risen doughs were punched down, a gentle, deflating press that released a puff of yeasty gas. Shaping loaves was another act of quiet creation. For the sourdough, a swift series of folds and tucks, creating tension in the skin before it was placed, seam side up, into well-floured bannetons. The smooth rounds of white and wheat dough were nestled into greased pans. The risen cinnamon buns, now plump and glistening with a light egg wash, were carefully transferred onto sheet pans. The bakery filled with the quiet industry of preparation. The scrape of a bench knife, the soft thud of dough hitting a pan, the clatter of baking sheets being stacked. The ovens were ready. Amos opened a door, the heat blasting out in a visible shimmer. He slid the first load of loaves onto the baking, stone with a long wooden peel, a movement as smooth as a violinist's bow stroke. The door clanged shut. Minutes later, the cinnamon buns followed into the second oven, then the waiting. This was the sacred pause. He poured thick black coffee into a heavy mug, the steam curling around his face. He leaned against the warm oven door, the heat seeping through his apron and work shirt into his back. Outside, the indigo was softening to a deep bruised purple at the very edge of the eastern hills. The village street remained utterly silent. Wrapped in sleep, then the magic began. First, a faint yeasty scent, the initial sigh of the baking bread. Then, deepening, the warm, comforting aroma of baking wheat and rye, the nutty undertones of the sourdough. And finally, rising above it all like a triumphant banner, the cinnamon. It wasn't just scent now. It was steam, perfumed, and glorious. It billowed subtly from the oven vents, carrying the heady, sweet, spicy promise of the buns. The air grew. Thick with it, cinnamon perfume steam that coated every surface, clung to Amos's clothes and hair, and drifted, surely out through the bakery's cracks to greet the waking world. He closed his eyes, breathing it in, the Appalachian hum rising softly again, a wordless counterpoint to the scent symphony. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird, ... The ovens announced completion with subtle cues. The rich, deep brown of the crust visible through the oven window, the hollow sound when tapped. Amos worked the peel again, retrieving the creations. The sourdough bowls emerged, crusts crackling audibly as they hit the cooler air, their slashed patterns blooming like dark flowers. The sandwich loaves were golden and high. And the cinnamon buns. They glistened, sticky with melted sugar and spice, the spirals dark and inviting, releasing their intoxicating perfume in thick, visible waves. He set them to cool on wire racks, the crackling song of the crust mingling with the gentle taint of the cooling metal. He filled the display cases, sturdy baguettes, crusty rolls dusted with flour, fat muffins studded with wild blueberries, delicate pastries layered with almond cream. But the centerpiece was always the warm cinnamon buns, now drizzled with a simple sugar glaze that pooled in their crevices. As he wiped down the counters one last time, the flour dust swirling in the light, he saw it. Through the top half of the bakery door, above the closed sign flipped to open, the eastern sky was no longer purple. It was a band of palest rose, then gold, washing upwards like watercolor spilled on wet paper. The harsh outlines of the white church steeple across the street began to emerge from the gloom. The indigo night bled away, replaced by a cool, clean gray light. Amos turned off the harsh fluorescence, leaving only the warm glow of the display case lights and the soft illumination spilling from the kitchen. He unlocked the front door and pushed it open, the little brass bell giving a soft, clear ting. The cinnamon-perfumed warmth rushed out to greet the dawn. He stepped onto the stoop, apron still dusted white, the residual heat from the oven's avis. Comforting presence at his back, the village street lay utterly silent, bathed in the fragile new light. Dew glistened on the manicured lawns and the slate roofs. Frost still clung in the deepest shadows near the stone walls. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine from the distant hills, now mingling irrevocably with the bakery's warm, sweet emissary. Not a car moved, not a curtain twitched, not a soul walked the sidewalks. The world held its breath in that pristine, silent moment between night and day. Only the faintest curl of wood smoke from a distant chimney hinted at other stirring life. Amos stood there, a solid figure framed by the doorway's light, the lingering melody of an old mountain lullaby a whisper on his lips. His hands, resting on the doorframe, were warm from the oven doors, ingrained with flour and spice, the tools that conjured sustenance and comfort from flour, water, and fire. The first true rays of sun crested the hills, striking the bakery window and setting the glass jars of jam on the display shelf ablaze like captured rubies and amber. Inside, the loaves ceased their crackling song, settling into quiet warmth. The cinnamon buns glistened. Dawn had broken over the silent streets, the baker's dawn. The village would wake soon, drawn by the scent of warmth and cinnamon on the cool morning air. But for this one perfect suspended moment, the world belonged to the quiet alchemy of flour, fire, and the patient rhythm of hands that knew the language of dough. The day, fragrant and golden, had begun.